Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCG live codes, make sure you check out the Potown store. You can get a 5% discount on your orders using that code OmniPoke. We have another busy week of IRL tournament results for the Battle Styles to Scarlet and Violet format happening in Malmo as well as Hartford, and we have some top 8 decks to take a look at, so let's get straight into it. It was a real huge weekend for Mew VMAX as we see Meloetta Fusion Sparkle Mew was able to take the win in Malmo, which was one of the smaller European events. It was just below 500 players. But yeah, really interesting to see this build, which is always kind of in the shadows compared to how much more popularity we see from DTE-based builds of Mew. But that pressure, that tempo that you can get from a Sparkle Meloetta combination cannot be sniffed at all. It seems to be built fairly reliably here with the Forest Seal Stones, the Crams, etc. Has space for that full package with the double Sparkle. Is also incorporating one copy of Deoxys, which is another decent single prize attacking option here, where you can deal 160 before adding in your power tablet modifiers, so it can get some decent uptrades even into some V Pokemon if really need be. So yeah, very powerful combination to have these two single prizes. It allows the deck to trade favorably from as quickly as the first turn of the game. And I think it was actually a pretty decent week to play this sort of archetype because we have seen an uptick in Lugia and Arceus builds. Having that pressure to just take a turn one, going second knockout on an evolving Pokemon is massive. And you can see that there's even the double rope in the deck to try and make that sort of happen. So you're knocking out the highest priority threat from some of the decks in the game that don't really do anything on turn one and just kind of bench their V Pokemon and hope to evolve and do things turn two. You can really punish those sorts of decks. So pretty nice. It does have that combination where we still see Judge Rocks and a couple copies of Path of the Peak, so it does still have that defense mode comeback potential option. And with triple DTE, you still have, you know, the way to go heavy on the Mew when necessary. So yeah, very powerful build. I wonder if it's going to keep seeing play from here. The only list we don't have from today is the finalist list, Consta, but it looks like they were playing a DTE-based build of Mew as well. But don't worry, there's plenty of Mew lists to look at today. In top 4, we have Brennan with Lost Zone Box. This is a very heavy Forest Seal Stone build. It's also playing triple Trekkers and double Pokestop, just to cycle through that deck as quickly as possible for those explosive starts. Very trainer-heavy based build, obviously with these stops, try and cycle through the deck. Has the double Recycler in here for even that sort of line. Interesting to not see Palpad when you are playing shoes and stops, but I suppose you just say yes to these cards if you see them off the shoes, and you're happy enough to stop at least one of these sorts of counts away. You get a little bit unlucky if it's Boss, Double Clara, those sorts of things, but outside of that, you're just trying to completely pop off on the opponent, and the Pokestops help you do that. This is one of the lowest energy counts that we have seen, but it's playing the double Recycler to try and make up for that, so you can get those gate activations on the Pokemon that you need them. So yeah, a very speedy build. Pokestop has been showing up in Lost Zone decks over the last couple of weeks, but this one completely saying no to Beach Court was a bit of a surprise. We have Piotr here, also doing well with a Kyogre build of Lost Zone Box, also playing the Pokestop, but also the one copy of the Beach Court. This is an adapted list from their EUIC 60, seems to be very streamlined, has that Zamazenta as the backup attacker. I know there is some question mark over this card versus Snorlax, because adding in the third energy type and only, you know, having 4 in those opening stages means you need to find one physically to attach, as well as having the gates option in the opening stages isn't always the easiest to come together, but the Retaliate attack is just so much more powerful than Snorlax's Thumping Snore. So the payoff is there in terms of just making sure that damage works for you. And we know Kyogre is obviously a great combo. I personally really like single price builds of Kyogre. It just gives you as many turns as possible to actually get to the bottom of your deck to get a reliable Aqua Storm off. So congrats there on the very solid finish. We have even more Lost Zone Box in the top 8 here. This is a Charizard based build, so it's really take your pick. We can see so many different ways of Charizard of Lost Box doing well. In this case, it's a Zard build. It's playing the double Manaphy, which is one thing the Zard builds might have to do, I think, with so much Lost Box around. You don't want to be forced to play a Clara just to get back mana fee and bench it when your ultimate win condition when you don't play Greninja is just Sableye faster and every single turn, essentially. So giving yourself the extra mana fee means A, you don't have to worry about prizing or having painful selecting combinations, but B, if your opponent is targeting your mana fee in a Lost Mirror, you can not be forced to play a Clara and still continue Colressing, which I think is pretty massive. Outside of that, we see the A-Spec Mirage Gate to try and get a faster Radiant Charizard. I know Jack played DTE in his Radiant Zard build of Lost Box this weekend, and it was a very similar purpose, really. You just want to have a slightly faster Zard in a lot of situations to help out, mostly against Lugia, I find, where a lot of the time they can negate your early like Cram Poke pressure or Sableye pressure, especially with only one belt. So having the gate in here can allow the Charizard to be slightly more effective. And in some regards, when Charizard's not mandatory, this acts as like a pseudo switch out where you could, pay retreat on one thing and still get your energy drop on Zard or on Sableye, which is pretty cool. We also see the Basin and the Raihan, so definitely intending to get Zard into the mix as early as possible. So definitely a big priority here for them. Pretty cool stuff to see. We have a Guardi in top 8 from Brian, and this is a pretty cookie-cutter list. It's incorporating Path now as well as an additional stadium card, which is certainly an interesting one. Can just make Path Roxanne a very strong combination against a lot of decks, I suppose, and maybe gives you some mirror edge when pretty much no one can do this against you in the mirror. So that's kind of the only change I can see from towards 60 from the EUIC, apart from the usual Serena research flip-flop. Other than that, it looks pretty much identical. Has just chopped into the energy count to go down to 11. That's really all it is. So pretty nice inclusion. We do have the other top 8 lists here from Dario and Lucas. I just had to dig out their Twitter posts. So we have Dario's here first, which is a DTE based build of Mew. Nothing too surprising in here. It is playing the Penny as a tech inclusion to help out against Lost Zone decks, which I do think is pretty valid. And it is just sticking with the double belt, which I think was a pretty good call actually going into this weekend, thinking there'd be an uptick in Arc decks. So I do kind of like that. Sometimes there's that debate of whether to play belt or to play cleansers, and I think I'm leaning towards the belt side of things right now. Now, Arc didn't really do too well in terms of making many top 8s, but I haven't seen the full day 2 breakdowns for Arc decks in general just yet, so can't really say that they've flopped too much, but they're still going to be popular going into the next set of tournaments, I would imagine. And then Lucas's build, again, not too different. This one isn't playing any counter stadium to just paths themselves, not playing the Lost City. It is playing Avery, which is interesting. It is also playing Oricorio, which is also giving some nod to Arc players and the double belt. So, yeah, pretty straightforward DTE base builds of Mew, which is no bad thing. This one's actually playing Hisuian Heavy, which is kind of interesting. So yeah, we've got those. Let's move on to the Hartford Regional Championships. I don't want to talk about any drama surrounding Rowan. Congrats on playing to a high standard with Fusion Mew. If you want to go and check out their Twitter and their post about what's come out about Rowan, you can certainly do that yourselves. I'm not here to talk about that. I'm just here to talk about the Pokemon. And it was in 2 separate tournaments, 2 wins for Fusion Strike Mew, and I don't think anyone could have predicted that going into this weekend. There are a few differences here between both winning lists. This one is also playing that Penny, which is pretty cool. Has a slightly different mix of stadiums as well. Just the one path this time is playing Crystal Cave, so Cave and Penny is really heavily teching against Lost Zone, which I think is fair enough going into this weekend. We've also got the Quad Trekkers as well, just to have as deep a dig as possible in the opening stages to make your combos happen, which again, you can't really question too much. These are essentially in the spaces of things like Featherball and stuff like that. And it's quite light on stadium bounces overall, just the 2 vacuums. But yeah, just again, big nod to Meloetta. That early tempo is pretty powerful by the looks of things. We have Grant doing well with Lugia in second place. This is a pretty straightforward list at this stage. I think most people have agreed on what's a pretty strong 60 for Lugia now, and I think that's not really going to change going forward. Everything looks pretty standard here, and it was partly popularized by Reagan here as well, who made top 4 with Lugia, and looks to be a very similar build from what they're comfortable with. It continues to be very strong. We have Luke with A DTE based build of Mew here as well. This one is still playing those cleansing gloves. Nothing too surprising outside of that though. We do have some Lost Zone boxes in this top 8 as well. Danny was playing a Kyogre build. This is kind of the American style approach with the Dragonites, Raikou, Forest Steel combo going on rather than Piotrs, which was all single prize based. So this is still a popular one. Also heavy on those Pokestops. Everyone is Pokestop gaming. I think just giving yourself an extra reach towards things like VIP Pass and switch outs seem to be massive, seem to be important enough to go for that. And when maybe like 30 cards of your deck are item cards, maybe the odds are just always in your favor. We have another Kyogre build. This is more single prize based and actually interesting. I hadn't prepared this, but yeah, this one is playing just Water Energy, Psych Energy, and Snorlax rather than having the Zamazenta that I was sort of debating earlier. It's also playing Articuno, which is kind of interesting. Can buy you even more time potentially, or just set some higher hit point Pokemon up for you, which I think is pretty cool. It does have Roxanne as well, so Roxanne Paralysis can be a play you can try and make into a handful of matchups. Even things like chunky decks like Arcdura, you can try and make this combination happen and maybe work towards a Rope Kyogre play, something like that. Could be kind of cool. Haskell in here as well, yeah, looking pretty decent. And I think all the Lost Zone decks that did well this weekend were all playing some amount of Pokestop, so that's pretty awesome to see. We actually do have an Arcdura Umbreon. This was kind of brought to light a couple of tournaments ago, or a tournament ago. And interestingly, it's playing the Lost Cities rather than any Tower of Darkness. I kind of like Tower of Darkness personally, just for extra thinning in the opening stages just to get that arc attachment developed. But it's playing very similar things here, where you have your belts at the very least and the Radiant Alakazam. It hasn't gone full crazy with the supporter line. It's not playing the Karen's Conviction in this case. Is just trying to use Hawlucha Zam to try and reach on, you know, Dura can push to much higher damage output with its pulverization, and you can try and use these damage counters to your advantage to just knock out a V-Star Pokemon in one attack rather than having to, you know, continually pulverize turn by turn by turn. Also, of course, have the single strike energy for the buff for both of these attackers, so that's kind of the idea there. It seems to be establishing itself as another way of playing Arc, continuing to do quite well, which is quite surprising to me because Dura seems less effective into Lugia than it was previously because everyone's playing the Urshifu, but it's still finding a way to be powerful. And then finally we have another Mew doing really, really well. And this is a DTE-based build of Mew. Again, nothing we haven't really seen too much of today. But yeah, there we go. So in terms of decks going into the next set of tournaments, where am I going? Want to try and find standard? That would be great. Yeah, let's have a look at what things are going to do, because I think there's still one regional in this format before we say goodbye to this one. I think Lost Zone box decks, it seems like Pokestop's the way to go. Kyogre did really well this weekend with a lot of placements with single price builds as well as multi-prize builds, which is cool to see. Lugia's pretty much well established. Mew with a slight comeback with Meloetta is something I didn't really expect, but probably is going to keep some of these Arceus decks in check, and Lugia decks, to be fair, by keeping them on their toes for that early pressure. Definitely makes players play quite differently into you. I think part of the reason why Meloetta may have done so well this weekend was going second into Mew. I imagine most Arc players and Lugia players weren't expecting any pressure whatsoever because DTE Mew has been so popular that a lot of them may have only been putting down one Arceus or only one Lugia, and then that surprise happens to them. It's like, oh yeah, you're the guy playing Meloetta, fantastic, good for you. So I wonder if that trap is going to change things going ahead. Really didn't see much Gudra, one Guardian top 8, but is being kept well in check for Lost Box. I think you need to be quite lucky at dodge and weaving a Lost Box to do better than like a day 2 placement with Guardi going forward. There was Anarch, Dura Umbreon doing well, but ultimately not a huge amount of them. But those seem to still be the sort of top decks in the game right now. So yeah, that's slowly getting towards the end of this format, but we have started to see even more adaptations of Decklists, and seeing Meloetta Mew is really interesting to me because I think that could be the most popular route for the Paldea format, actually, because of the introduction of Spiritomb from that set. But before getting too ahead of myself, I'm going to sign off for today, and we'll be back tomorrow with the set review, so stay tuned for that. Cheers.